Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Soul Sync podcast. If this is your very first time clicking on the Soul Sync, well, let me tell you what this podcast is all about. I ask so many of the big questions in life, all to do with healing, energy, the law of attraction, our destiny, our soul plan, previous lives. And how did I even start this podcast in the first place? Well, it was all off the back of a kind of spiritual awakening I had after what was a really hard period in my life. Some might call it a dark night of the soul, others might call it just complete catastrophe. But, I'm on a mission now to try and help people as much as possible by getting really good guests onto this show and also sharing my own experiences with you. I feel like I've turned a bit of a corner with my mediumship in the last week or so. I've really been struggling to sort of sit in the power and feel spirit. And I think part of it is because there's been a bit of a gap between some of my sessions that I've been having. But I finally feel like I've found a method. And I also realised what's been one of the big blocks recently with my mediumship is expectations. Sitting there, waiting and expecting something to happen when I'm with spirit. And actually, that's just a block in itself. And, what I've really had to do is kind of try and work on my own self-belief as well, because it's become apparently obvious that I don't lack self-belief in any other area of my life. Well, maybe a couple, but we'll talk about that on another episode. But when it comes to me, when I put my mind to something, normally I have a lot of self-belief and I go out there and achieve it. But with mediumship, I think it's because it's almost like the unseen, the unknown, the untangible. I have a lot of self-doubt when it comes to my ability to do it. But I finally found a method of sitting in the power that actually really works for me and allows me to feel the pure love of the spirit world. So I will be doing a video on my YouTube channel to sort of talk about the method that I'm using now, and still practicing with that. We've got a new series coming up very soon called Masterclass. Now, what is Masterclass? Masterclass is where I get what I perceive to be a specialist in one particular area, and we just delve into one particular subject in real detail, because also, obviously, the normal episodes on the Soul Sync is me talking through a guest's journey in history. These episodes, it's very easy to see what you're going to get from the episodes, because it says very clearly what the subject matter is all about. On the first one, we're going to be talking to Linda Roch, who is an amazing, literally an amazing psychic medium. She was on a few weeks ago, but she's coming on to do a masterclass titled Putting Healing at the Forefront of basically all that we do. And one thing we got talking about during the masterclass episode, which is going to be coming out soon, is when we're talking about healing, she came on to the 12 steps, which I've just started reading. I've only ever associated the 12 steps with Alcoholics Anonymous, so I've never naturally gone to read it. But she actually said that the powerful principles of recovery can help in any type of healing, and the 12 steps were actually channeled by spirit in themselves. So I've started reading the 12 steps, and as I go through that, I'm going to give you some of my thoughts about them, because I think healing is such an important point. It's also what we need as light workers. Also, if we want to work with the spirit world, we need to heal ourselves. Mediumship at the end of the day is a healing modality. So I want to share that journey of healing with you too. We're going to be talking to, in this week's episode, Ellen Edmondson. Now, she's been on the show before, quite some time ago now, but she's coming to talk about the subject matter of, let me get my words out, how to parent highly intuitive children. And it's a subject she knows well because her own son was really, really, really intuitive and could see things when he was young. And it actually led the story to Ellen going on a reality TV show, which was where children explored their past lives. And Ellen's story is really, really, really interesting, especially when it comes to her son. She also founded the Highly Intuitive Kids Community, which is an initiative she started. So I would say this episode is a great listen for people, even if you don't have children. It really makes you think about you, your inner child, and stuff like that. And the conversation was, so candid, so honest. Ellen's such a beautiful person, and I think you're really going to enjoy this week's episode. We had a great chat. So without further ado, I bring you Ellen Edmondson, who is the author of the title A Place of Love and Light. And she's going to be talking about, as I said, how to parent highly intuitive children. Enjoy! So, Ellen, thank you for returning, first of all. It's great to have you back on the Soul Sync.
Oh, and thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation last time, and I'm looking forward to this one as well.
So, Ellen is the author of A Place of Love and Light, and she came on the podcast a few months ago where she shared her lovely story, and it's a really, really good story. So, I do suggest if you want to find out more about Ellen's story overall, you could go back and listen to that episode. But she's very kindly come on the show today to talk about how to parent highly intuitive kids. And when we first discussed this idea, I thought, you know what? This is such a good idea. And I think it's going to be relevant to a lot of people. And it's a big part of Ellen's story. So today we're going to kind of focus on that. And this episode is all about trying to, Ellen sharing her experiences of how to parent a highly intuitive child with the aim of, helping as many people that it might be relevant to. So on the subject of highly intuitive kids, I know we discussed it on the last time you was on, but to go into more detail for people just sort of meeting you for the first time, tell us about your son first of all, because the story there it is really, really interesting, and it sort of blew me away when you told me last time, Ellen.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll start there. Our stories are intertwined, but he's the reason why our effort with the highly intuitive kids, how it all came about and how it started. When he was about 18 months old, we started noticing these experiences that he was having. When he just was able to start really talking, he didn't watch TV or anything, so we knew these experiences couldn't be something he picked up that he saw somewhere. And at the same time, he was having experiences, my gifts were opening. But what happened was he came to us one day and he started mentioning about, he couldn't sleep at night. He was waking up because when he heard emergency vehicles, he would just have this reaction, like, just breathing hard, just waking up like scared. And we were like, what's going on? And so one night he heard one, he finally shared, he started telling us a story about a past life that he had. And we didn't know at that point about past lives. I was just getting into what was happening with me, and we knew a little bit, but he started sharing a story about how he had been chased by these bad men into a burning building. When he went into the building, it was on fire. And he said, but mom, I died, my body died, but I didn't. I went to the nowhere place. And he said, but you and dad were also there, but you weren't you and dad. And he said, and you were sad. He said, but I waited in the nowhere place for you two to come back together. And he's like, you took a long time to come together, which is true. My husband and I got married a little older. And he said, and I came back to be your son. And we were just sitting there like, wow, that was our first encounter with him sharing something like that. And we're like, he's talking about like a time, he's talking about before this lifetime. So that sent us on doing some research, but we didn't know what to do with the information. He started having some other sixth sense experiences. So I tell parents to listen for these kind of conversations and don't dismiss them, which is because we knew what I was going through, we didn't understand what he was going through, never seen it in a child, but we were like, what do we do with this? And one night he was 2 years old, racing upstairs to go to bed. My mother had passed away before he was born. And he said, we were like, why are you racing upstairs to go to bed? And he said, well, because grandma comes to play ball with me at night. And I was like, oh. So I knew my mom was still around and was still watching over him. And that touched my heart. And I was like, okay. I was like, but he knows his grandmother's around. We still didn't know what to do. We were just like, okay, well, that's great. And then it was about a year and a half later, my father-in-law passed away. It was at that point that he came to us and he stopped being able to sleep at night in his room or in his bed, which a lot of parents with highly intuitive kids may experience, that kids have trouble sleeping at night. That's that's something that he started experiencing because he said, we're like, well, why don't you want to stay in your room? What's going on? And he's like, well, because grandpa's in my room. And he's like, he's in my room all the time. So he was seeing his grandfather in the room.
Wow.
And it was scaring him. So I didn't know what else to do, but I went in there and I just started talking. I was like, he can see you. He can sense you. I need you to please back away, or so it doesn't scare him. But those were like 3 experiences in a very short time that we knew. We were like, what do we do? What do we do with this? So if parents hear this, the one big thing is we never dismissed his experiences. We just listened and we were open to it. But we never showed that to him. But behind closed doors, we're like, what do we do? You have these
Well, of course, I think the way that you handled it is so good. But it's, I guess, because you were going through an experience yourself, and I guess there's probably so many children out there that aren't lucky enough to maybe have a parent that's kind of understanding and knowing that there's more. So he's having these experiences then. What did you do with it?
Well, see,
where did you go?
That was a foundation. We didn't know what to do or where to go. And like what you said, with parents, because we were a little more tuned in, we were still trying to figure it out. We knew it was something unique, like what I was going through. But there are parents that don't have an idea. And that's what we've found, like when we're going through this effort, that there's no resources out there. There's more information coming out now, and people are putting out information. And there has been some, but not widely known, because this isn't something that people talk about. So as he's getting older and his abilities he starts entering school, moving to school, because he's in and out. And children from the age of 0 to 7, 8 years old are just naturally tapped in. They're right brain, intuitive little beings, because that's the only space they know to come from. So they're pure connected energy. So they're going to tend to have more experiences like we're talking about, and remembrances. And there's lots of, after we went through our experience, we found so many resources and books and information to help us. And that's why we wanted to share with people. But when he entered school around the age of 7, 8, he was still talking more about experiences. He would start talking about things. I was like, don't talk about that at school. Don't talk about it outside the house. We'll just talk about that in the house. Because I was like,
oh goodness,
other people won't know, won't understand. But the part with that was he started taking it, and this is where parents trying to be helpful. He started taking it as something was wrong with him, and that's not how we were intending it. Because we were like, other people don't understand. They're just going to think something's weird about you, and we don't want that for you. But he was like, I can't be me. Why can't I be me? And I realized him not being able to express that part of himself was shutting him down. So he started, when he was going to school, about 8 years old, he came home one day and he was telling me, he's like, Mom, I'm trying to tell the kids that we're multidimensional beings and they're not understanding. And he was trying to talk these big concepts. And I was like, you understand this. I said, you can talk to me about it, but there are even parents, adults that don't understand this. It's like, you really, just don't talk about it at school. Well, long story shorter, we ended up, his abilities started opening and he was experiencing all these things. We didn't know what to do. So we were just at a point, going back to my religious upbringing, I just went into prayer and I was like, I just need a sign. I need something to help us, because I don't know how to help him. He started getting bullied at school because the kids didn't understand him and the things he was talking about. And he was telling kids, our first language, we talked with our minds. We didn't talk with words, and just all these things. I knew it wasn't strange. Like some parents would look at that and maybe think my kid's having some issue, but I knew that wasn't it. He's tapped into something. So in my quest, I was put it into prayer. It was just within a couple days, and not knowing that this was going to happen, there was a email just showed up in my inbox from a woman talking about a casting call for Psychic Kids show. And they were looking for children with abilities to come on the show. Well, I know I had abilities. We didn't formally have Ethan tested, but the way he was talking and what he was experiencing, I knew he had something.
You just knew he had abilities. You didn't need to test to prove that.
No, I knew he had something going on. But the thing was, just like what you said, Jason, where do you go? We didn't know who to help or where. You can't talk to a doctor. You can't tell a teacher, because you know what'll happen. The doctor, how do we do this? Yeah. So I just answered it. I was like, on a whim. I was like, okay, I'll just respond. So I sent a note back to the woman who sent it out. Said, I normally don't send requests out like this, but there's going to be a casting call for this show. And if you're interested, she's just putting it out there. When I responded, it was like 2 hours later, the executive director sent me a note
What?
back. And with my story, the little story I'd written up about my son, she said, responded back. And it was from that point to like 2 weeks later, they went through a whole process. She's like, it sounds interesting. We'd like to talk to you. They did Zoom interviews. We had to do some interviews and assessments. The show was actually very good. This was on A&E cable.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For the reboot, because there was two of them. The reboot that happened that started in August of 2019. So from that to when the interviews and the screening that they did, because they even have the kids talk to like psychologists. They have to go through interviews. They verify that they have abilities. So if anybody's watching those shows, they do go through a whole process with it.
Yeah.
But in 2 weeks, we knew that we were going to be on the show. And then it was like a month later, they were out filming in our house. So when we went through that whole process, that brought us some relief, because what happened was they had the children who were initially on the show in the first series were grown up, and they came back to mentor the new set of kids that were having.
That's such a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah. So actually, Ethan's mentor was Ryan Michaels. So he was he was a child in the first set of series, and then came back, and he was Ethan's mentor. So the whole cast and crew, they had a child psychologist here on site and everything. But what happened as we went through that process was amazing to us, because the big thing that jumped out was when they had him they have each of the child go on location and do a shoot, and it's pure. They don't tell you anything. Ethan had never had any experiences with his abilities except just talking to Dan. No training, nothing. We were kind of sheltering him from it because we thought he was too young to understand all of this. They took him to that site, and we walked through the building, and he had to pick up impressions and, give what he felt and what he saw around the space. And my husband walked with him, and I was in the room watching, and I was just amazed. We were both amazed when he was going through and the things he was saying and what he was picking up. Some things made television, some things didn't. But I was just like, oh my gosh. He was talking about like the history, that there'd been a fire in the place and that this family lived there, and all these things. And at the end, the gentleman verified, and I was just like, wow. We didn't know the extent of the abilities and his sensitivities and what he was picking up. And so what came out of that whole thing for us was they help us to know that he had multiple abilities, what they were, and verified for him that there was nothing wrong with him. They helped, because we kept telling him we just can't talk about it outside of the house. But then he got such a level of comfort. And this is what I'll tell parents is when your kids are having these experiences, let them talk about it. Just listen to it without any kind of judgment. Just let there be open communication like we did. We didn't say right or wrong. We didn't put them on a stop. Don't make them perform for you or anything like that. Just make it like a normal part of your everyday experience. This is just how it is. And so after he was on that episode, he became, because he had started to become very withdrawn. He was, because he was bullied. He thought something was wrong because we were saying, don't share it outside of the house, and not intending for him to take it that way. But he really shut down a lot. But after that episode, it was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. And I have a gift. I have this ability. And so it made him feel better. And we saw him just start come out more.
Well, I suppose him meeting the mentor probably played a part in that as well, and to be with other children who had the ability. How did they describe the abilities to you? What would you say what were the abilities they described, and what was your understanding of his abilities?
Well, I will say that there were 15 other kids on the show. The kids didn't get to meet each other. They all filmed in different locations.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, but the good part, it was all one-on-one at a person's house, just with your mentor, with the mentor he had. And the mentor picked up and explained some of the things that he told us, because it was also about them showcasing their abilities a bit. And so he had kind of picked up on things and then told us when he got here. But of course, Ethan has the ability of mediumship. He's a healer. He's got energy for healing. He has Oh, and Ethan astral projects. It's calmed down
Mm.
now. He's got a little older, but he would astral project very. And there's a lot of children that can do that young when they're not attached to logic and reasoning. They can, easily leave their consciousness leave and go other
Mm.
places. But even that during the show, Ethan would tell us places he had been that we had never taken him to, and he's like, "I've been there, Mom. I've been." He saw the mountains. He saw Sedona, like mountains, and he's like, "I've been there." And he was telling us stuff, and I was like, okay. And he was like, he could describe things. Um,
Uh,
they all, so
it's just fun. It's so funny, isn't it? Like
it
it's
is funny.
I wish I could astral project.
He did that. But you want to know something, Jason? It's funny because even I realized how I had these abilities all my life, but didn't understand or know what it was. But what he described to us of what he was going through when he was younger. I did too as a child, but didn't know what it was and didn't share it with anybody and shut it down. And so
Mm.
that's what happens with adults when they get older, because when you have intuitive children, it runs in families. You're going to have a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, somebody has this also in the family line. And so, but a lot of times people don't realize it. They don't.
Well, I had my granddad, so that kind of definitely makes sense. He was a medium himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so Ethan now is 13, just turned 14. How does is this still a part of his life now? Is he very in tune with it? Because he's obviously at a time now where, he's in his teenage years.
Yes, and I'm going to go back just a little bit just to say, even after that episode, his abilities, they got us through that and told us what he had, but we were still left with the gap of not having ongoing help because it's a show. They don't
Oh
provide
yeah,
ongoing
yeah.
support and help for that. So we were still trying to search and figure out what to do. So that just sent me on a lot of research, books and trying to figure things out. But what happened, and I'll say this was pivotal to starting this whole effort. One day when he was I guess he was 9, and it was after we had done the show. He had come home. He was still down because the kids were saying things to him about the way he was talking and thinking about things, and he just couldn't relate because his thoughts were way bigger and older than what the kids around him were. But he was feeling down, and I was telling him about being confident in his abilities. You have these gifts. You were on the show. You have to be confident in yourself. And I was talking to him about it, and he looks at me and he said, "Mom, I can't be me until you be you. Stop hiding."
Oh goodness me!
Said, "Wow." And I realized that just hit me. I stopped and I was like, the universe just gave me a huge message through my little child that he's not going to be able to embrace his sensitivities and be who he is until I embrace mine and role model that for him. I was reading for people like behind the scenes and quietly, not telling anybody. But it was in that moment that I realized that message that came through him was a big message for me. And it was role model this for him, embrace it, take it on. I knew in that moment that I had to embrace this with a purpose, with passion, without fear of what anybody was going to think or say, and just be out there because I needed to make a difference for him. I have to be the role model and be the best parent to show him how to use this, because these are gifts that are meant to help. I would say help the world, help humanity in whatever way you're meant to show up authentically and do that. And so that made the big difference. And that's what pushed me into putting up this effort. This is all because of him and starting the whole Highly Intuitive Kids effort.
So to talk about, it's honestly the most incredible story. So to talk about the Highly Intuitive Kids Network that you were the founder of, obviously we know what the driving force is behind you opening it, but I'm guessing it was due to a lot of your own struggles to find any information that you created this initiative. So tell us about the work that you do and some of the examples of people coming forward? Because I'm guessing there must be some stories, Ellen, that you've come across in your time.
Oh, definitely. And I would love to share that just because it helps to give the scope of things. And so, with what you were saying, like that was the catalyst for everything. I will go back to answer like what you said. Now, with Ethan being 13, 14, when kids hit that teen stage, a lot of times it's more about fitting in. And so they may try to set their abilities aside because they want to be like everybody else and not feel different and not feel, like there's something unique about them with these gifts. So right now, Ethan knows he has these abilities and he's okay with them, but he doesn't use them, and we don't push that for him. He's still a minor, and we let him. He's got to have his experiences of growing up and being in each stage of life. But right now, he's pushed it aside a bit, although his abilities are still there. So, and a lot of teens do that. And I've run into parents who say that my child was very connected. And they talk about things when they were younger, but then they hit the stage of teen and tween, and they don't want to be bothered with it. And I'm like, well, first, no, it's never going to go away. And that's what we tell Ethan, your abilities are not going to go away. This is your God-given gift. So, but when you're ready to start working with it, you'll know, and we'll be here to support you. And I think that's what every parent needs to be able to tell their child. But with all of this that happened, it sent me on a huge research and massive just finding books and resources and internet searching, all these different things. So with all that, and I realized, I was like, there's 15 other families that were on that Psychic Kids show. And me and some of the parents were still communicating after the show, still just trying to, figure how do we help our children. And everyone's at different stages doing different things. And on the show, they showcase kids with all different abilities, from medical intuition, mediumship, healing gifts, just remote viewing, just all different kinds of things. So I was like, wow, how do we, things happen to us for a reason, and it's meant to share and help back with others. Then for me, it was like in the fall of 2021, I started getting just massive downloads. And it was like 3 weeks straight, I kept being woke up at like 3:30 in the morning with all this information about set up a website, and this is what you do. And with my automatic writing, started coming do this website, set up a group to support it. So I just started. I couldn't not do it because I kept being woke up.
You just felt like you were absolutely had to, like you were being called
I had to
do it.
I was called, inspired to do it. So I did. I set up the website. And so there's the highlyintuitivekids.com website came out of that. And what it has on there is information about just about everything about highly intuitive kids that parents could need. But it's set up in a way that we wanted to make it all the information palatable to those parents needing the resources, but also for educators and counselors and other professionals to be able to look at it and understand it. So there's a lot of research, and there's links to different studies and reports by PhDs and all that validate and verify that these are actually gifts. So I was guided that this needed to be a resource that could be used to actually help mainstream people embrace this, understand it, and then maybe start working with children differently, or getting an understanding for it. So parents can refer to the site. We've had I set up a Facebook group to go with this. We have teachers, we have educators, we have counselors out in the group, as well as parents out in the group. So they're all coming, seeking information about how to support these children. And being more open to it. And so that was what started the whole, I was getting downloads, and I just started following it. I just surrendered and committed myself that when I get this inspired call, which I couldn't deny because I couldn't sleep for 3 weeks, when had information coming to me, I had to do this. So that just kind of set me on this track, but the track to help all these other families, knowing that there were 15 other families out there. And I knew if there's 15 families, there's more families, I think, and they got to be around the world. And so we have people in the group from around the world, and I've had people reaching out and sharing stories and telling us and saying thank you, because now the whole effort is to normalize the conversation around this.
Yes.
Normalize it so that we start talking about it, and the more we normalize it, it helps the children. Just like for Ethan, you don't have to say to them, "Shh, don't go out and talk about this. You can't say anything about it." You'll always have people who believe or don't believe, but when a child has an intuitive vocabulary that they can understand and start, and parents need to start that from the time they're young, especially, like I said, from 0 to 7, they're dialed into this. That's all they are, like really intuitive, right brain and creative little beings. When they hit, 8 and up and they start school, then the logic kicks in. They start learning the ABCs and 1, 2, and that starts, reasoning starts to override intuition more. And see, that's why I love on our website, we have the Albert Einstein quote that, let me try to get it right. The Albert Einstein quote that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift.
It's very true.
Yes. Because
very profound.
And that's the quote that's used on our information, and that's one of the things that when I got that, I was like, that resonated. I was like, that's it. That's the whole thing. We're all really intuitive beings, and everybody has the intuition, heightened. We're talking for the kids, the heightened sense of it. So where you're having the sixth sense experiences, but we've learned, we talk ourselves out of things, or we learn to be more reasoning and rationing versus going with that gut instinct and that inner knowing that's always constantly guiding and leading us, because we're always connected to that and to something bigger, but we reason ourselves out of it. And then we tell our children, oh, don't talk about that, or that's not true, or you're not having that experience. When they're having these imaginary friends playing with them, it could be imaginary friend, but listen to how they talk. And if they're talking about details, or the friend is wearing a certain time period of clothes, or some things that are more than just imaginative play, they may be tapping into somebody around them, usually a departed loved one or somebody who's around watching over them. So you listen to that, but don't have kids, don't dismiss it in children. And so that's where the whole conversation was, to get parents to start opening their minds and thinking a little more and listening to their children in a different way, encouraging them to keep open communications and embracing what they're offering. Because if they can we can keep our kids connected to their gifts, then they don't have to turn into like recovering intuitives or mediums at an older age who get disconnected, because that's usually what happens. People get disconnected from it, and then they have to reconnect. And we've been doing some local efforts. We started online, and we've been moving to some local efforts where I've partnered up with this woman, Judy Bases, who she has something called the Illuminate Festivals. And she started them. She's also a medium, but she was intuitively guided to start these festivals. And they go around, she's up and down the East Coast of the United States and like the Midwest, and she's branching out, it's growing and moving out more. But we've paired up. And so when she has her workshops, and it's like a holistic wellness, psychic, very intuitive kind of sessions, but very professional, very, she mainstreams it so that people can look at these alternative ways of like energy healing and meditation, all these different modalities in a different way to mainstream it. Well, I take workshops and I do talks to parents in local communities, and we've started branching out. And the things that we're hearing, Jason, are just amazing. When we've had folks come into the workshops without children. They're like, I don't have a child, but I'm coming because I need to know this for me. I was the child. I was that kid. I didn't have anybody to talk to. I'd had experiences and did them. And so we're uncovering more and more, because as I did my research, 10 to 15% of the population have the trait of high intuition, and high intuition and empathy. That's it. So when you're talking 10 to 15% of the population, it's not as rare as what people think it is.
We're just not talking about it.
Yes, that's it.
Because I guess, why are we not talking about it? I guess, why is that? I think we're all so programmed that the material world, everything we do is about the material world, isn't it? It's funny because I do think, well, why are we not talking about it more? But It is one of those, I think, because it sort of ties into death. A lot of people it's an uncomfortable subject area for some people, I guess. So for the work that you're doing then, overall, obviously we're never going to unpack every bit of advice for highly intuitive children, but some of the main sort of takeaways and bits of advice you might be able to share from your experience, I think would be really helpful, because obviously there's I'm sure there's a lot to it, and I love the relationship, I must say, that you describe with your son. I think that it's really, you the way that you encourage his gifts is so beautiful. And isn't it just funny as well, Ellen, the way it just has tied in with your journey all at the same time, and it all kind of came about at once.
Yes, and I feel like that's just part of the just leading up to this of being able to help others. It came about both of us unfolding at the same time. I believe that we'll all have our calling, and it was just for needing to see it and understand it in a child, and that's helped to move into this effort and helping us to push it out to help other people. Because I feel like we're at a time so many more children are coming in connected and sensitive and open and misunderstood is what I really feel is happening. You said some pieces of advice. I'll just kind of go through some of the main things like that I think are important. And that's one thing I'm going to come back to on like school with highly intuitive kids, because that can always be challenging. Like you said, there's so many topics around this we could talk about. The main things is encourage open communication. That's one of the first things. That's why I was talking about from like, even when kids are young and when they start talking about certain experiences from 0 to 7, some kids will grow out of it and some don't when the logical mind kicks in. And even there's books like Wayne Dyer, and I forgot the young woman, he co-authored it with a woman, but they're called Memories from Heaven. And it's about past life experiences. So there are books and information out there that I think that parents who don't understand this, or who have it or don't think that they have it, or get books, get information. Go to the website. We have a books section on the website to get you started, but to do that. And that will help you to know how to foster open communications with your child. But it's going to be different from the time they're little to when they hit that teen tween stage and they want to push it away. Give them the space, but just let them know that they're there. Some kids don't. Some kids want to embrace it the whole time. Just knowing that, give them a vocabulary for understanding their, the senses, the extrasensory, their psychic senses, that if they have energy in their hands, energy healing terminology, don't dismiss anything, but let them follow their lead. Follow their lead is another thing. Let them show you what they need from you, but keep an open mind and not judgment for what they're expressing to you, and just listen. That's going to go a long way to keep them open and talking to you throughout all this. And then a big thing for children and adults, because we found this in going to the workshops of the adults coming forward and talking to us, something that is connected with your abilities. And if you're not processing this intuitive energy that you have around you, is a lot of kids will develop anxiety, or they'll have anxious episodes. And if anxiety goes on for a long period of time, it can become depression. And if it keeps going, you'll want to call and get some assistance for that if a parent can't help a child break out of it. But you want to, for these kids who are sensitive like that, you want to teach them mindfulness and self-awareness, mindfulness techniques. So meditation, deep breathing, yoga's good, movement for grounding. You want to have different ways, creative activities. That's a huge thing. Just, you can process a lot of this energy just by drawing, painting, because it's so right brain. Intuition in these experiences are so right brain to process it, so it's not stuck in their body. So, for example, our son is he's a runner. And from the time he's little, these kids can tend to carry a lot of energy with them because of their sensitivity, and they're constantly being bombarded with stimulation. And if they don't know how to ground or, shut their energy down, so they're little sponges picking up so much, they can just be,
I almost feel like you're describing me. I need to become more grounded, I think, as well. Ellen, I think, I find that as well. Sometimes I'm overstimulated. I need to get the energy out. So I think that you're probably very good advice to adults with who are highly intuitive as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is so important. And we actually had and with this effort, I've brought in different experts for interviews to talk on different topics. And there's recordings out there on that. But we had a woman who talked about that, Rebecca Kramer Fiskel, and she has a book called Let Them Move, which she intuitively received. But she was a teacher turned occupational therapist. And what she saw was that there were a lot of intuitive, and she's a medium as well, a lot of intuitive children carry a lot of energy, and they're not being given enough opportunity to move in the classroom. And so because they don't get a chance to move enough and burn it off, and like we keep Ethan with track and activities that help keep him grounded and like saying being creative, he's highly creative. If children don't have a chance to burn it off and they're just told to sit at the desk and they're more intuitive learners, then that's where, and this is where I go into that's where some of these children that are highly intuitive can be classified as ADD or ADHD, because it's not understood that they just need more movement to burn off this excess energy and more grounding for them. Now, there are children that have ADHD and ADD and like sensory processing disorder. High intuition mimics those things, can mimic those. So I always tell parents when you're going through school and these types of assessments come up for your child, or you're being told, make sure that when you talk to whoever you're working with, that they tell you it's a brainstem issue. A brainstem issue is a brainstem issue. That's that's ADD, ADHD. That's a brainstem issue. But if it's not a brainstem issue and it's more about behavior and how they are reacting,
yes,
especially in school, that's a learning style issue. And our intuitive learners, they are ones that, and I was this way, I see this in Ethan. I've had so many people at these festivals come up and tell us too, when I talk about this, our linear learners learn A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Our intuitive learners learn A, B, C, X, Y, Z, because they can make those bigger leaps and jumps in things. And it's not that one is right or wrong. It's just the way they learn and the way they think.
I feel like you're describing me. We get bored. We don't want the A, B, C, D, E, F. We get bored and zone out.
Right. And that's what's happening. Kids get bored and zoned out. And when they do, they get labeled as not paying attention in class, and naughty, and maybe with a diagnosis if it's not understood. And that's what's happening with children that have this high intuition. And so it's just because the school environment is set up for linear learning and it's not set up for intuitive learning.
Well, I guess the whole the sense of academia, it's all about what would you teach? I guess, how would you handle the whole exam situation and everything if school was done in a different way? It is a problem, but I guess I guess your son's own experiences of schooling and how you've kind of had to move him on as well to different schools to sort of tailor where he is, but you're making those adaptations yourself.
Well, and that's the thing for parents is, and what you're saying is true. You can't change the school system easily, but there are little things that, like, I advocate for that we've even experienced along the way with teachers. And it's going to start one person at a time, but it's just like incorporating even those mindfulness techniques, like a little bit of meditation in the class. Ethan had a teacher, and we have, just going back to our experiences, Ethan's been in public school, private school, and we've homeschooled. Parents can't be afraid, because your child is going to grow and go into different stages as they go from, primary years to middle years to the upper years. don't be afraid to move your child into what's the best experience for them. Okay. So sometimes you may have to change schools. Sometimes you might have to change teachers if they don't understand. But when you know what your child, that they have these abilities, you have to work with that. And one of the things we ended up doing after being on the show is, and I know not every parent will want to talk or openly discuss this with their schools or even with doctors, but we've started having introducing those conversations. And so we started talking to Ethan's teachers about his abilities and sensitivities. And when we started having those conversations during parent-teacher meetings, we had different times, 2 different teachers say, oh my gosh, I have that ability as well, but I'm not saying anything to anybody. I'm not telling anybody. And so with that, and one teacher we did, and it was in a conference, and she told everybody in the room. The other teachers found out. She's like, don't tell anybody, because we're in so much denial. This goes back to normalizing the conversations. But those teachers, because we came forward and said it, they opened up and they became allies to help with our son. And I say there's some of those teachers in every school. There are, and
well, it goes back to you saying 10 to 15% of the population, but we don't want to. So even now, I have medium experiences, and I'm developing in that. But even I'll be very careful who knows about it. At times, because maybe it's because what you know is so profound, it can challenge someone's entire perception or their worldview. So maybe, we're not talking, it's a funny one. It is a funny one. It's almost like a taboo in itself, but you are right.
But you're right. And the thing is, even for me, I didn't open up immediately and tell people. I'm just at a point now that it's like I made this commitment to be able to model it for my son. Now, I don't throw it at people. If it comes up, I embrace, this is who I am. This is my authenticity. This is me. This is my best self. And if my uniqueness doesn't make you comfortable, it's okay. And if you want to be part of my world, that's fine. And if not, that's fine too. I honor you, you honor me. And that's just where it is. But I think by having these conversations, and I've seen it from going to these local workshops and doing this, people are opening up because they're like, oh, me too. Even if they say it quietly on the side, or I understand it. I had a friend, or I know somebody. And so, but then it starts opening the conversations up even more. But I say that for that, don't be afraid to move your child if you need to, because the worst thing that can happen for a highly intuitive child is they disconnect from themselves and their abilities. You're never going to be authentic. You're never going to be fully fulfilled or happy when you have to walk around denying who you are and the gifts you bring to this world. And so people are forced to wear a mask and be not real when you have to hide who you are.
Yeah. And I think Ethan's growing up at a time which is like never before. We've never been in this period with, I guess, the pressures of social media and all the world that we live in now. So, I really do hope people start embracing this more, because it's such a wonderful thing. Hopefully I do think we're starting to wake up a bit more as a society. I think we're starting to realise that we don't want to live in virtual reality all the time, and there is perhaps a limit to how much device time is perhaps friendly or good for us. So I do think we're slowly waking up in that department, but I think that there's probably still lots to be done. Just on, I guess, a kind of closing note, because we couldn't talk about Ethan and where he is now, and people who are going to be listening to this, like you said, he's 14 years old. What's he doing at the moment, Ellen? Please tell us. We want to know. How is he doing?
Well, how he's doing right now, I want to wrap up a quick thing for you. So the three other quick things is validate and celebrate any intuitive moments that your child has. So that does help them stay connected to themselves. And like I said, lead by example, what we've been talking about through here, and
Yes.
expose them to diverse experiences. When they have gifts like these festivals that I mentioned, I've seen more of a rise because we have been talking in local communities and it's getting out there more. Parents are bringing their children to this. I encourage, expose them to positive things so they know if they see Reiki or if they see crystals or they see, readers, that it helps to normalize it again. And that if you have these abilities, you see people using it in a positive way. So whatever experience you
Yes.
can expose your child to who has abilities, helps to, once again, it starts normalizing it and it helps them to embrace it and they won't disconnect. But you still, like we were talking about, have discernment to know who and where you share it, but also know you don't have to hide it. And they need,
Yes.
yeah, that's important. And they need friends and connection. And that's where finding other families or intuitive kids, making those connections. That's why we started our Facebook group. And then locally, we want to start getting folks together. When they have these kids recognize each other so beautifully and will connect, and they know that they have someone they can talk to at their age, that, if I'm seeing, spirits, or I'm sensing this, and I can say that to somebody, a friend who doesn't think I'm weird or bully me or shut me down, that's really important too. So we've tried to provide all that for Ethan. And so in making those connections and just keeping that kind of environment and showing him by example what we're doing. So right now, Ethan's 13. He just turned 14 a couple weeks ago, but he's 13 and he's always been very advanced in his thinking and perception and how he experiences life. Well, and with schooling, going back to schooling, because he's an intuitive learner and thinker. And I will say this, Jason, I just got to put this little plug in because I always mention about the Myers-Briggs assessment. Have you heard?
Yes.
I
Yes.
I say that's one of the things I talk about. I think all children should have that assessment because that assessment will determine part of the character is whether you have an intuitive style or an extroverted
It's
style.
so accurate. I only found out about it when was it? I'd heard of it, but I took it 6 months ago. And it's literally scary. It's like reading yourself. It's telling you, all about you. It actually really opened my eyes. I'll put the Myers-Briggs, the name of it in the show notes for people. But yeah, it's if you want to get to know yourself better or get to know your partner or child or whoever it might be better, that's it. I found it profound.
Yes, and I think that tweens and teens should have that assessment.
Yeah, I agree.
Because part of it is it shows if you have an intuitive learning style, just you're intuitive. And for Ethan's, he came up intuitive and empathic, which are two major things he is. But I always, because for a parent or even an educator, when a child is an intuitive thinker and learner, then their learning style is going to be different than linear learning. And you have to engage the child differently. And there can be some simple tweaks in the classroom that could help, but that's a whole deep dive in another conversation. But just knowing your child's personality, how they perceive the world, how they take in information as a parent is key to your interactions with them. And even for a teacher, when you have that information in your back pocket as a parent, it can help guide your conversations at the school for teachers. But I tie that back to Ethan has that intuitive learning style. He makes big leaps. He, in his thinking, he's always thinking big thoughts. He's always been somewhat bored in school because he can get to the conclusions quicker than the rest of the class. We've struggled with that. And I was mentioned to you before we were on air that even back to when he was in third grade, we put him in a science, technology, engineering, math school, a little more advanced, because he knew we could see that he was advanced in his thinking. And even with that, in third grade, he came to us and he said, "Mom, I'm smarter than this school." I was like, "Yeah, I know you're really smart, but we're trying to figure out what to do." So we had him going through school, but it was still the same. He was still bored. So fast forward just to a few months ago, my husband and I talked about it. My husband was like, "You know what? I'm going to take him up to the community college, local college, and have him tested." So he's like, he's really into science. He's very smart with that. I was like, maybe we'll do a chemistry class together if he can pass and get in. So we took him up there and had him tested at the community college. And we were thinking he would just take this, even just like a little non-credit class. He tested and got into the college. He's in middle school. He tested into the college. So we were like,
how wonderful.
Wow. So when he kept telling us he was bored, he's now taking college level English classes. And we're doing this in baby steps because it's a big leap to go from middle school to college. But now he's starting to take more college classes, and we're in the stage, like a lot of parents, we take it year by year trying to figure it out. So now we have to get him through high school, but he's dually enrolled in college, and we've got to work through all of that. So he'll start high school in the fall, but he's also in college, and we're going to marry that up. But we listen and we watch and we pay attention to what he's telling us. And that's how we ended up making that leap, because we still kept saying he's still bored. He's still bored. And a lot of times when children are bored, it just kind of gets dismissed as like they don't understand the material, or they're not, it's either too advanced or they're just daydreaming, just goofing off. But it was never that for him. We kept seeing he's like, no, he's advanced in his thinking. So that's where he is right now.
I'm so excited to hear what he goes on to do. I wonder what job he'll do one day. Be very interesting. I bet this has all changed your husband's worldview, having two intuitive people suddenly blossoming at the same time. Has his perception shifted, I bet?
Well, for us, but I have to tell you, my husband has I will say Ethan gets more of his healing. My husband, he's a dentist, but he just has natural energy healing abilities. Yeah. He's the only dentist I know that when people go to him, and most people have a fear of the dentist, they usually fall asleep in his chair. They're getting root canals or teeth pulled, but he's just a natural energy healer. And so, but he's channeling that through his work as a dentist with folks. And it's pretty amazing, because we just are always hearing stories about, I was so nervous, right? But he's like, people are snoring in the chair getting their work done.
I could never imagine. He must be a very, very, very good dentist, because I couldn't imagine that myself. Well, do you know what? Thank you so much for coming back on. If you do want to go to the Highly Intuitive Kids website, I will put it in the show notes so you can find out more about Ellen there, and also her book as well. It's amazing. A Place of Love and Light. Again, that'll be in the show notes if you want to find out more. Ellen, thank you so much for taking the time to come and share all of your experiences, wisdom, and just with so much. It's just so beautiful. And, the very best of luck to Ethan at what is an exciting time in his life.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I do want to say for people, like I mentioned, we have had authors and folks come into our parent community on Facebook. So when you go to the website, you can consider joining the parent community. We have Pat Longo, who is also the mentor to the Long Island Medium, Teresa Caputo. She is going to be coming to talk to the group on April 18th. We had her in last year as well. We do Q&A sessions with different folks. We had Sarah Weiss, who's written Your Psychic Child, and Michelle Henderson, who's done Nurturing Intuitive Abilities for Kids. So you can check out the website. There's videos out there, but there's
also amazing. There's so much on there. I'm excited to see what happens with that as well. Well, there you go. It will all be in the show notes. It sounds like there's no reason not to check it out, even if you're an adult who might be unfolding. Do you know what? Just on a closing note, one thing that jumped into my mind when we were talking through this, yes, this is how to parent a highly intuitive child, but I think what you've actually just described is probably how to parent any child. Good communication really is at the key of everything. And I think that, that went through my mind. I think this is such a beautiful episode. It could be just how to parent a child. But Ellen, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for having me back.